However, I think that the nature of this visit that the president is undertaking, it's a state visit. It's not even an official, it's an official state visit. It's not a working visit or official visit. And a state visit means that a president goes with a higher number of people, the issues, the things they're going to discuss, the memorandums they're going to discuss, the deals they're going to discuss, and are signed by the cabinet secretaries and government officials. And therefore, he needs to go with a larger a number of government officials wherever he is going, being a state visit. And so just traveling perhaps with Kenya Airways, as one of the politicians was saying, might not really fit for this particular state visit that the president is going to undertake. I think we may be losing the crux of the matter, issues to do with defense cooperation, multilateral regional issues, Kenya becoming an anchor state, health cooperation, defense cooperation, trade and investment. If we focus a lot on the jet, I think, yes, people can discuss that. It's a very small issue. I wouldn't spend a lot of time like the politicians are doing to discuss the so-called now hustler jet, but focus on the substance that is there, Dipal.
Yeah. All right. You think it's a small issue, Dr. Kanenje or Dr. Mvungi?
Well, I'm not quite sure about it being a small issue, but I'll look at it from a slightly different perspective, maybe. The president is a CEO of the country. He carries the image of the country wherever he goes. And that emphasizes the idea that perhaps he needs to travel right. And also we are at a time where, security is a big issue. Air security around the world is a big issue. Coming on the wake of the death of Ogola, and now the Iranian president, air security is a big issue. So our president needs to travel safe, and he needs to travel in ways that bespeaks of the honor of the country. But really away from that, friends and Diba,
but
let's not lose sight of the fact that we are a
But let me just ask a question. It seems when you say
let me finish my argument and then you can come in. My argument is two-sided. I'll finish the first side.
Okay,
Let me come to the second side. I was saying we are a poor country if you used all the parameters that are there to measure. I'm not an economist, but I know one or two things to say that Kenya is a poor country. And doing something like this that sounds very exorbitant, it makes the government look bad, really. If you looked at it from a PR point of view, coming on the wake of, floods that have killed people, coming on the wake of when our education system is really struggling with finances and all that. If the strategies of the president cared enough about his image, then this is something that they could have managed differently. But for me, it bespeaks of bad PR, public relations, and in politics, there's a way in which perception is everything. So it needed to have been managed much better than they did. It looks very exorbitant, looks a bit uncaring, and you use such huge resources, if indeed that is what is being spent, but it looks like a very executive chat. I'll think more about how the poor look at this, how the victims of floods look at this, how we are struggling with education funding and all sorts of the sectors that are not really working very well in the country. But undoubtedly, he's the president of the country. And he has a right to travel safely and in ways that embodies the honor of the country.
Okay, let's hear from Dr. Kanenje.
Well, first of all, it looks beautiful. Especially if it has a cozy bed and stuff like that. I surely would like to fly in it. Now, I think the question we should also be asking is not so much that it's a private jet, because we have Harambee 1, which is about 20 years old, 30 years old in manufacturing, and about 20 years old since President Moi purchased it, way back in 1995. Now, what we understand is there have been issues about, because the president has his own jet, Harambee 1, which I would enjoy to see that image landing somewhere else, because it's representing Kenya, as opposed to a jet that does not communicate the message of Kenya. So if, in the wake, of course, of a number of air crashes that have taken place, if the safety concerns regarding the Harambee 1, which is the presidential jet, official one, is it time we sell that jet and get something that's actually going to guarantee safety, but also means that we're not going to be using, of course, a lot of taxpayers' money because they subject, for that. And so many presidents, when on such kind of visits, they use either private jets, or they use national presidential jets. And so we expect that perhaps going forward, we're still going to go back to using our jets, and so there won't be questions about what jet the president is using. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it also depends with where you're going to transact. Now, safety is number one. It does not make sense if it happens to you like President Raisi, and then you don't make it back to the capital city. Whatever you have done goes down the drain. But of course, there are genuine concerns when Kenyans start raising some of those questions. However, I think sometimes it's lost in the conversation with regard to what are the requirements and how safe should, for instance, a presidential travel be. Not very bothered, because I think the delegation, the people who can fit in that jet are not actually very many. It's a fairly small jet, It's not the Gaddafi-like, Gaddafi will go with the entire country, when he's visiting another country. But I think the discussion should be more about what actually are we going to be able to get. If we're going to spend $2 million on that, what is going to be the benefits of that, to Kenyans? As opposed to sometimes, us obsessing so much on the cost, but without really understanding the kind of transaction that we may be able to get. And so I think if we interrogate what the country is going to get out of the trip, if it by far it is profitable to Kenya, then of course it's worth it. I'm looking at it as a business venture, So is it going to worth the cost of investment? And so personally, I will not focus so much on the jet per se, but I'll focus on the actual gains that we're actually going to derive from the United States interaction.
All right.
I think
but before we come to you, Peter, I just wanted to ask also for an aircraft, 20 years, 30 years is not very old. Yeah, if it's all
40 plus
we
years.
have 40 plus years.
It's 40 plus years, and it cannot go directly it cannot fly directly to
the United States.
It has to refuel somewhere.
No, the current.
If it's maintained in a very mint conditions, spare parts 40.
Even if it is maintained, it does not have the capacity to go across the Atlantic, from Nairobi to cross the Atlantic.
Correct.
That's the point. Okay. But let me make my contribution here by saying, well, I think the public discourse is riding on the fact that the Kenya Kwanza government came to power on the language of frugality, on the language of tightening the belt, and language of minding the business of the ordinary Kenyans, and investing every dime on the ordinary to uplift the lives of the ordinary Kenyans. That is the public discourse. And therefore the opposition is right to basically go to that in terms of putting the Kenya Kwanza government on the table and dissecting it for whether it is preaching water and drinking wine. I think that's the politics around this question. And it's a fair issue, and therefore the government owe an explanation to the hustlers and to these people, which is not very bad in terms of democracy, because democracy is about putting things on the table. So what Dr. Kanenje is saying is true, because we are a nation that is now ranked fourth in Africa. We ranked fourth in terms of regional powers. And in the American order of things, we are top priority. We are actually, if you want to put it that way, whether it was Trump or it is now Joe Biden, both of them rank Kenya top. Obama ranked Ghana on top. So that was his priority country. For his successors, Trump and Joe Biden, Kenya is top. And therefore, we stand to gain a lot through that in terms of trade treaties, in terms of other treaties, multi-sectoral treaties that can be signed. And it is not a surprise that we are the country from the continent that is going to make a state visit in 16 years. That's another dynamic we need to put into our play. Since Ellen Johnson, we are the next country that is making a state visit to the United States. Kibaki made a visit to the United States and had a photograph, if you go to the internet. Uhuru went to the United States, not once, not twice, many times. Again, Ruto has been there before. But this is a special thing. It is a state visit. In other words, America's business is grounded in the time that we're saying to hosting a specific country, the way they host Britain, France, and other important countries. And therefore, I would find it very difficult if I would have had Ruto is spending 2 hours in Heathrow connecting to America for a state visit. It would look ridiculous to the country, that he has to connect to Heathrow and so on. Or he's going to use Harambee 1, now refurbished and all the things put, but he has to stop at Dakar, Senegal, to refuel, or Kevad, because he has to do that. Now, this happens against the backdrop of things that you are now beginning to see. An accident in Iran, an accident here at home, accident elsewhere. So that must also be taken into account. And I'm sure the security details of this country have advised that this is the way to go about it. I think moving to the future, in order to avoid this issue of the Hasra jet, it must be incumbent upon William Ruto to take it from where Daniel Moi left it. Because Daniel Moi bought the Harambee 1 as a state jet. Now, either within the framework of Kenya Airways or anything else, we need to upgrade the capacity to move our leaders from our country to international forums. Not just the president himself, but our leaders. We are going to be attending the FOCAC summit this year, which is a huge thing because it is expected to pass our money to finish the railway from Naivasha to Maraba. That's why Museveni was here. One of the reasons why Museveni was here is to talk about the finish, because the Ugandans want to be connected to the Indian Ocean. So how do we move our leaders from our country to these important meetings which have multiplier effects for our economy? And we need to get a new jet. And a new jet means that we can also hire it out to the Ugandans, to the Congolese, to the Sudanese, and others. Just like Ruto is hiring other people's jets at the amount that is being mentioned here. So we need to think proactively, and we need to shift the terms of debate from the rock-rized debate about the hustlers versus the others, and then begin to think about our nation and how we are held by the rest of the world. Look at a simple thing like hosting UNEP and Habitat in Nairobi and what it has done to our city and our economy.
Right.
So those are the kinds of dividends of good diplomacy. And I think in this case, cost or no cost, Ruto is doing good diplomacy. To be able to be hosted by America or even to be hosted by China, the two superpowers, at one time for a state visit is a huge, huge thing. We need now to look forward to a state visit to China, another one, then we make all the deals, another state visit to Germany, We make all the deals, another state visit to Brazil, which is an emerging powerhouse in the global south, and we make the deals. Let's not parochialize our public debate by talking about the jets and what it cost. Because these are 200 million. Imagine about the people, the per diems that are given to the people who will be traveling outside in their capacity. It's also huge. Countries are difficult to run. They are not about 200 millions. They are more. But I think this is incumbent upon the government to make this point, that if we are going to benefit from relations with other nations, it is an expensive business, and this is what we are getting in return. Make Kenyans understand that. They can.
And of course, you have to look also at the cost-benefit analysis of
Yes.
purchasing a new jet,
Yes.
as opposed to outsourcing for
Outsourcing,
temporal function like this.
Yes.
Because also with the new jet, of course, that will cost billions, and the maintenance of it also will be quite costly at the end of the day. And of course, you can look also at the idle capacity, that maybe that will be when it's just aircraft on the ground.
But if you
I think this is the other thing, and I just to add on what Professor Kagonja said, this is an exceptional visit. There have been only 5 state visits to the United States of America during Biden's administration, by Japan,
Yes.
by Australia, by France, and by Brazil or another, I don't know which other country, but this is the 5th state visit. Only 5 state visits during Biden's time for the last 4 years. And for the last, the last time Kenya had a state visit to the US was 15 years ago. And so this is not the working visit that the president does when he goes for a UN assembly. In which case, actually, I've seen Ruto travels with Kenya Airways or a commercial airline. This is a very different kind of a visit. It's a state visit, and where a lot of things. In fact, we should be asking the government, president, and those who are going there, what did they go and do, and what is it that they are coming with, rather than looking at how they travel to the United States of America.
I think then, Deepal, that is where the catch-22 is, that the president's PR team needs to up their game. I don't know. If they are a chat, is it possible to just find a way of putting it even in the Kenyan colors? I could have been very happy to see that chat in the Kenyan colors. Could they have negotiated? And could they have provided the information that we are talking about here now? That the president's visit to the United States is like no other. Barring the differences that we have internally here, the image of the country, the president is carrying the image of the country of each and every one of us. That as a Kenyan, seeing President Ruto there, you're forced to walk with a bit of a guide, because, guys, we are there. I think that is where the president needs to rethink about his PR team, which seems to be a little bit juvenile in the way they do things, because we are seeing the president with the basketball guy and cracking jokes with people here. They needed to be a bit more serious and bring out the information of the gains that the country is going to make out of this.
Right.
Actually, I do agree, and I think part of what I would say, some perceived failures of the current president, a lot of it had to do not in terms of actual failures, but actually just a terrible PR by the PR team, because they don't communicate. Now, it was great to see the president with Shaquille, but I suspect there are other things that went on beyond that should be communicated. Kenya is also trying to build its basketball. For instance, Atlanta is a home of big basketball players, including some Africans like Dikembe Mutombo, who remembers that. Yes, and who succeeded in that place. And I'm sure there's certain discussions that took place, but I think when we focus on what is funny alone instead of what is substantive, now that's what makes Kenyans start wondering, what are these trips about? Or are we just globetrotting so we can enjoy drinking Coca-Cola out there, and don't think that is the case. Yes. Yeah,
and Deepal, it bespeaks of really what is happening in the profession of public relations, where many people seem to think that public relations currently can be done by bloggers and comedians and away from the traditional trained political public relations experts. That's why, in my view, you have more content creators accompanying the president, and you know what we call content creators in this country. But we needed to see serious, political strategists who think through the material they are putting to the public. That now we see it in the media, in your profession, that you are moving away from properly trained and schooled journalists to using other people who make us laugh and probably reduce stress, as opposed to providing us with information that can be used for policy formulation.
Right. Okay.
And that's the point I wanted to add here, that one of the weakest link of the Kenya Kwanza administration is matching the agenda with the executioners.
Yes.
Because if you have a bold agenda that is encompassing, you also need a capacity around you to implement that agenda. Otherwise, it will just be empty talk. But when you do a quick analysis across the Kenya Kwanza government on what they have promised and who is supposed to deliver it, you find a serious deficit. And I think this is something that the president needs to be worried about, that you have great ideas. And that is now borne out by the PR team. Because we need to have a lot of pages on our papers, a lot of communication to our media houses about the benefits of going to Atlanta, apart from seeing a football player or a volleyball player. They need to that. And two, what are the Kenyans in Atlanta that he went to see? What are they bringing home? We needed to see the cumulative figure of how many millions those people in Atlanta are bringing home as remittances. Because somebody can do a quick mathematics of what we gain as Kenyans from Atlanta.
Thank you.
This is the point we're trying to make.
Right. The president also met with the diasporans there in Atlanta. And we just want to get some of the sentiments that, of course, transpired on that particular meeting. So let's just hear some of the transactions on the deliberations that were made, the questions that also were fired at the president, and how also he fared with the questions.
We must do the right thing so that we can take our country to its rightful place. All of us here, we agree that Kenya is a great place. That I believe with the whole of my heart. And I believe we can change Kenya in our lifetime. While we are here, all of us, Kenya can be that country that everybody wants to call home. And that is what we are going to do. So to you who are here today, I am very proud to be in your midst. I am very proud to be a Kenyan, and I believe together we can change the country. And so, I know there are so many things that I would have wanted to say, but I will reduce it to 3 things. Lakini sio ile mambo matatu. Yeah? Sio ile mambo matatu. Number 1, my mission is to achieve 3 things. Simply. Number 1 is to unite our country. We spend 500 billion every year to import food items into Kenya. We import maize, wheat, edible oil, rice, and all manner of things. And I have made the decision that we are going to invest in production. By next year, we will not be importing a grain of maize.
I do a lot of acreages in Narok for wheat, But I know, I'm not too sure, but I know it came to your attention that this planting season, I lost over 250,000 on fake fertilizer, which was sold to us by the National Cereal and Produce Board. So from your office and from the ministry that is standing in for agriculture, as farmers, we are suffering on this end of getting things that really, I'm not sure if the government knows or the government has party to it or what it is that you need to tell us as farmers, because I'm trying to fight for my refund of all the almost 100 bags I got for fake fertilizer.
I will answer you right away. Number one, we asked every farmer who bought fertilizer that was finally identified not to be good to register, and 7,000 farmers registered. And already we have started compensation of every farmer. You will get equivalent fertilizer without having to pay. Every farmer. That is number one. That is number one. And number two, we have taken the managing director of Cereals Board and all his team. They are now waiting for prosecution. We have already sent them out of office, and we are going to deal with them firmly and conclusively. Are we together? So we will not only refund you, we will not only give you, replace your fertilizer, but we are also going to deal with the crooks. Yes, let me, the lady.
I want to tell you, thank you so much for coming to Atlanta, Georgia. We are very excited to have you here. To introduce myself, my name is Jonelle Carol Menifee. It's my mother and partner, Carol Menifee. And we represent Solar Time USA. And we have a company in Kenya called Nice Solar Time Kenya. And our focus is mainly solar.
Excuse me, madam. Your English is a bit... Can you try Kiswahili? Maybe. ama kidogo upunguze the twang imenipita kidogo. I'm sorry.
Very interested in rural development when it relates to farmers, when it relates to underdeveloped communities. Is that slow enough? Just want to understand your administration's program for last mile connectivity and making sure that as Kenya develops, it doesn't leave the rural community behind.
Are you talking about electricity?
That too.
What was What? Okay. Sorry, I had to get some translation. I now know what you want. It is true. It is true that we have a program on electricity and the last mile connectivity. And it's a program that we have worked on for the last 10 years. And in fact, in 2018, the number of households that were connected to electricity were 2.3 million. Today, we have 10 million households connected to electricity. And this year, in our budget this year, we have 12 billion shillings that is going to go towards that program of last mile connectivity.
Right. Right, the feel and flavor there of the US tour, indeed, and raft of questions are being raised there by the Kenyans in the diaspora. We just want to wind up on that particular topic. I don't know what you've picked, Professor Kagwanja, Mustafa as well. Those are the things that are really emerging. You can see also some of the farmers that are in the US and they're still farming here in the country were adversely affected by the fertilizer issue, and we've heard from the president and his reaction on it. Just briefly before we move on.
Yeah, thank you, Dibal. And I think the last, there was somebody who asked about fertilizer and the fake fertilizer. And that family takes us to the issue of corruption. Corruption in this country is still very high. And it is, even if we do all this that we are doing, however many state visits the president is going to make in many countries, and corruption is as high as it is today, then this country will really not move anywhere. And this is the message that if I was to have access to His Excellency President Dr. William Ruto, I'll tell him that corruption in this country, and I personally have experienced this kind of corruption, people coming from government, including those who are close to him, to extort money. And the names are there, Dibal. I think the president should really work extra hard to weed out all these people, including those who are close to him. Mm-hmm. And we have names, Dibal. We know what is going on in this city, especially in Nairobi. If this will go on, then it's going to make Kenya is trying to come up as an anchor state. These corrupt cartels, a new cartel seems to be emerging at the Nairobi County government, in key government national institutions. If he is not going to ensure that these cartels are taken out, then this country will continue to stagnate for a very long time.
Right. Professor Ombongi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dibal. I think I will pick it from where Mustafa has left, that Kenyans out there, Kenyans in the diaspora, are taking keen interest of what is actually happening at home here. And that demonstrates the keen interest that people of Kenyan origin have, whether they are in America, Canada, or Australia, to take part in the development of the country. And maybe that is why if the president will take it from there, and we create policies back here home to make their life easy when they are coming to invest. I like what happens in India, where according to the Indian law, every Indian who lives out of the country is an Indian. They only call them non-resident Indians. And the opportunity is open to them. It's just like those who are living in India. And massive development in India is actually being driven by the non-resident Indians. There is a good practice to look up to and borrow. And Mustafa is talking about the culture of rent seeking, which is very open in our Mideast right now. Maybe that is something that His Excellency the President needs to find a way to deal with, because this is the attitude that comes with what some commentators called the mentality of our time to eat. And a few characters are actually eating literally.
Right. Peter Kagwanja, briefly.
Yes, I think 3 quick points. First, I think this.
Let's speak two on this matter.
Okay, very well. I should have finished one by now. Make data about the president's trip available. What we are seeing up to this point is debating home. We've not started to see America. We need to see that. Bring America to us and carry us with every mile of his trip to the United States and what it means to us economically and politically. Because if that doesn't happen, then he's going to come home to debate about how money was wasted. But if Kenyans are carried along with what he is doing there, then he'll come home to relations about what he has brought home. Otherwise, the debate in Georgia is basically taking us back home to fertilizers. The debate is taking us back home to taxes. It is bringing us back home. And people wonder, does it make a difference that he's in the United States and debating the United States? I think that go back to the PR team and the team that is packaging the information that is having. We need to move Kenya forward in terms of moving the debate. Let's Kenyans also go with the president to the United States and experience what he is experiencing. His team has a tall order to do that. I hope Itumbi can do that.
All right.
Yes, Dibao, there are more than 3 million Kenyans in the diaspora, more than 100,000 Kenyans in the United States. Now, Ambassador Meg Whitman has been one of the foremost marketers of Kenya to the United States. What we expect, and especially as the entourage that accompanying the president, is what are they doing specifically to sell Kenya to Kenyans in the United States with regard to opportunities that exist. Remember, right now, the diaspora remittances by the Kenyan diaspora, it's well over $4 billion. That is a significant amount of money. Now, what we also need to have is not just remittances, is selling Kenya in terms of opportunities for investment by the Kenyan diaspora, which is actually, a lot of times in many countries, it is either the middle class or sometimes above, upper middle class. And so what are we doing? And unfortunately, one of the things that we have a tradition, and not just Kenya, but lots of Africans, is we would accompany the president or our leader, and we simply go there, get mesmerized by things, drink Kool-Aid, and then go back home. That is useless. And if that is going to be the case in this trip, then the president has to make sure that unless you have a specific role you're going to play and you can write a report about what you have done, you will never accompany him on his foreign trips. Because there is a trip, there is an entourage, and we've seen some of them. But what we haven't seen, or at least perhaps the PR team is not doing, we've not seen these people sell Kenya to the Kenyan diaspora, let alone the Americans. So if you can't even sell Kenya to Kenyans there, how are you going to sell Kenya to the United States?
Indeed. Thank you. Right. Yeah. We want to see what also was happening yesterday in Iran, and we know the burial of the former president of Iran also will be tomorrow, where thousands of Iranians gathered on the streets of Tabriz to mourn President Ibrahim Raisi after he was killed in a helicopter crash. Mourners followed a funeral procession through the city in North Iran while waving Iranian flags and portraits of the late President Raisi and 7 others who were killed when a helicopter they were traveling in crashed in a mountainous area of Iran on Sunday. Despite the huge crowds that the pictures will show you, not all Iranians supported the president, and many celebrated his death on social media. On Tuesday, crowds of mourners followed a lorry carrying the coffin of Mr. Raisi and those who died with him, including Foreign Minister Hosseini Amir Tenerio, Minister Ahmed Vahidi, said in a speech. He said, quote unquote, the members of the government who had the honor to serve this beloved president, the hard-working president, pledged to our dear people and leader to follow the path of these martyrs. From Tabriz, Raisi's body will be flown to Qom, which is considered the second most sacred city in Iran after Mashhad. His body will then be moved to Iran's capital, Tehran. Processions will be held in the city today morning, and Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, will lead prayers at a farewell ceremony. Raisi is then expected to be buried in his birthplace, Mashhad, on Thursday. Right, I just want to look at that as well. That was shocking since Sunday. And I know we have a lot to really talk about. This particular latest development, very unfortunate for the country of Iran. He was here last year meeting President Ruto, and that also sent a lot of reactions every which way in terms of diplomatic circles as well. But let me just begin with you, Dr. Mustafa, on that particular note. And the burial that is tomorrow, what does it portend, especially for the politics of the Middle East as it stands right now? We know the deputy president now is holding forth. He should be sworn in after the burial.
Yeah, Dibal, the death of the president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, is coming at a time when there's hate and tension in the region, and in particular between Iran and Israel. And if you recall, in the last, just very recently, a few days ago, Israel and Iran have been exchanging blows, and America, the West and the East and the Middle Eastern countries had to come together to try and cool off the tensions that we are seeing between these two countries as a result of the kind of war crimes and crimes against humanity that Israel is doing against the Palestinian people. There are a lot of information coming out about what actually caused this tragic accident, or whether it was an assassination attempt. And in a cloud of war that is going on in the Middle East, anything is possible. It is not very clear, but tension is very high. It is going to be extremely high in the region, particularly with the death of Iranian president. Kenya and Iran was developing very close relations, and in fact, Iran was becoming a closer, or Kenya was engaging much more closely with Iran more than it did a decade or 2 decades ago. Iran was trying to get out of the sanctions that the US, particularly during Trump's time, had slapped on it because of its nuclear program. And there is still a lot of tension. There is tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia, for example. So it's not just Iran and Israel. And the political situation and environment in the Middle East right now is very difficult for many countries in the region. We hope that this particular accident, or whatever it was, is not going to cause more problems for the region.
Right. Professor Peter Kagwanja.
Yeah, I think it's in good... It's good measure that the president has sent a message of condolence to Iran upon the death of the president. As you know, Kenya is the second largest trading partner of Iran in Africa after South Africa. And therefore, Iran is not just an ideological country to us, it is a trading partner, and that's important. You remember the president was here, the late president was here. Which is also a great honor that Kenya is one of the few African countries where he stepped, and it's good to remember that. Iran is emerging as one of the most powerful nations in Asia, and apart from their back and forth wars with the United States and that tension, Iran is one of the most democratic countries in the Middle East. Contrary to what is seen, and that's where the contradiction of the American policy, they preach water and drink wine, because countries, compared with all other countries in the Middle East, this is the only country where you see transition of power in democratic form. And the same tensions you find in liberal democracies, where leaders are liked and disliked. So the kind of things you see in the streets, people who are emotionally attached to what has happened and people who seem to be celebrating what has happened, is a reflection of the Iranian democracy and how they perceive their leaders, so to say. And it is unfortunate that President Raisi passes on at a very critical time when Middle East is in turmoil, and where Iran is at the heart of that, the defense of the Palestinians, the defense of the oppressed within the region, the Iranian Democrats seems to be championing that agenda. And of course, the tensions between Israel and Iran are very clear. And Iran seems to be making a serious comeback in terms of global incorporation, and America seems to be easing its sanctions and other the things that they have put on Iran. And therefore, we mourn the president of Iran. We celebrate Iran's democracy. We celebrate Iran's role in seeking solutions, durable solutions to the problems of the Middle East. And I think he'll leave a gap. But as we've said, Iran is known for peaceful transitions, which is the mark of democracy. And therefore, we're going to transit to the next leader, and the country will stand and continue to be a partner to Kenya.
Right. Dr. Kanenja.
Yeah, of course, our thoughts and prayers to go out to the family of President Rais and the Foreign Affairs Minister, as well as others. It is true, Iran increasingly, is a friend of Kenya, and that was evidenced by the visit by the president, and they kind of also welcomed, Kenya accorded, the president. Now, there are two ways also to look at it. One, President Rais was very central in the emerging rapprochement between the Gulf countries and Iran and Tehran. The tension between those, for instance, Riyadh and Tehran, are probably at the lowest they've been in a very long time. And there's been hope that the kind of polarization that exists in the Middle East, which of course has an impact, not just in the neighboring countries, but all across, the global south, that they are going perhaps to be worked on, because we see open diplomatic exchanges and interactions in ways that we have not seen before. But also critically, it's also coming at a time you've had some heightened tensions, especially between Tehran and Tel Aviv. And to the extent that, of course, this death is going to rob the kind of leadership which is both pragmatic, as well as intentional. If you have to make an assessment, of Middle East geopolitics, then you realize there is a vacuum that has been created. And so the question is, whoever is going to succeed, and of course right now you have a vice president who is now, stepped in a role as a caretaker, is the eventual successor going to maintain the same tempo of diplomacy as well as engagement? Now, perhaps to close on this, there is also especially with President Rais, there was a shift to increasing engagement within Africa. And he was very intentional in trying to build partnerships, across the continent in ways that, his predecessors perhaps might not have been as active. And so, at a time when much of Iran is normally actually not told in the world, but it has one of the largest industrial bases, one of the largest manufacturing capacities. Part of the, I think the consequence, which is not an intended consequence of the sanctions, is it allowed Iran to develop a degree of self-sufficiency that countries that are developing can actually learn from, whether it's from the auto industry or basic manufacturing in things. And it is the kind of model that countries such as ours actually can be able to learn from in developing our indigenous capacities for industrial growth. Because without industrial development, it's going to be very, very hard for us to achieve the kind of visions we've set for ourselves. And so I think it is a loss. It doesn't mean he was loved by everybody. I don't take some of those celebrations seriously, in part because most of them started being, fronted by Fox News and the Jerusalem Times, and they're talking about several people celebrating. Of course, you want to highlight some of those kind of things. However, I think if you were to do the math on the global geopolitics and the kind of relations that was emerging between Africa and Tehran, as well as Nairobi and Tehran, then it has robbed a leader who I think was very intentional in trying at least to contribute to a new world that is now increasingly multipolar.
Indeed. Right. I think we've, Dr. Mbonge?
Yeah, just a few points in addition to what my colleagues are saying. Of course, our message of pole, if I may put it in Swahili, to the people of Iran. And as a country, we have lost a partner in development. And the direction things were taking, especially with the visit of President Rais recently to Kenya, it will help us as a country to balance our dealings with the West, with the United States and Europe and also China. Iran will provide the requisite balance to avoid over-dependency, excessive over-dependence on the West and the rest of the countries from the East. And that's important. And we have had this, including in our own University of Nairobi, where we have had a couple of Iranian students studying. Very recently, myself, I supervised an Iranian student for his MA, Mr. Amin Mohin, who I supervised. And then number two, and Mustafa spoke about this, the Middle East situation is characterized by a lot of tension. And for Iran, it is actually both extra-Iranian tension and intra-Iranian tension. When you look at within Iran, it's a fairly divided country. And I just hope that an enemy somewhere did not take advantage of that internal tension to do something like this. I'm hoping not. So it really emphasizes that the Iranians need to go back to the drawing board and rethink about their unity, because the tradition, the old adage says a house divided in itself cannot stand. And finally, and this is very interesting, perhaps the world needs to rethink about the security of political VIPs. We have had this crash of helicopters. There's a photo that is doing rounds in the media now, where you have the Iranian president and his foreign minister who they died with, and you have our own president, Ruto, and General Gola. The three of these guys have been claimed by a helicopter accident. One will want to know whether these helicopters are originating from the same source. That's something very interesting that one will want to know. And if it's the case...
They are all Bell helicopters.
If that is true, then we need to re-examine our leaders' security, especially when they are traveling in this type of helicopters.
Right. We need also to maybe investigate if there's any malfunctions with those
that are innate to these Bell helicopters.
We want to take a short break, but before we do that as well, we want to see Dr. Mustafa and Dr. Ifime, please. Where the International Criminal Court wants to issue arrest warrant for top Hamas leaders, as well as for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and charges of crimes against humanity in the Gaza war. Its Chief Prosecutor Karim Khan announced on Monday, the 22nd day, or that is the 227th day of the Gaza war. He said, "My office seeks to charge two of those most responsible, Netanyahu and Gallant, both as core and as superiors." That is what it is. Let me just play the clip so that we can hear it clearly. And also we'll get a rejoinder as well from the Prime Minister of Israel, that is Benjamin Netanyahu.
The outrageous decision by the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, to seek arrest warrants against the democratically elected leaders of Israel is a moral outrage of historic proportions. It will cast an everlasting mark of shame on the International Court. Israel is waging a just war against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas massacred 1,200 Jews, raped Jewish women, burned Jewish babies, took hundreds hostage. Now, in the face of these horrors, Mr. Khan creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas. This is like creating a moral equivalence after September 11th between President Bush and Osama bin Laden, or during World War II between FDR and Hitler. What a travesty of justice, what a disgrace. The prosecutor's absurd charges against me and Israel's defense minister are merely an attempt to deny Israel the basic right of self-defense. And I assure you of one thing, this attempt will utterly fail. 80 years ago, the Jewish people were totally defenseless against our enemies. Those days are over. Now the Jewish people have a state, and we have an army to defend our state. Notwithstanding the blood libels Mr. Khan has leveled, Israel will continue to wage this war in full compliance with international law. We will continue to take unprecedented measures to get innocent civilians out of harm's way and to ensure that humanitarian assistance reaches those in need in Gaza. Mr. Khan also sets a dangerous precedent that undermines every democracy's right to defend itself against terror organizations and aggressors. The ICC has no jurisdiction over Israel, and Mr. Khan's actions will not stop us from waging our just war against Hamas. But Mr. Khan's abuse of this authority will turn the ICC into nothing more than a farce. He's doing something else. He is callously pouring gasoline on the fires of anti-Semitism that are raging across the world. Through this incendiary decision, Mr. Khan takes his place among the great anti-Semites in modern times. He now stands alongside those infamous German judges who donned their robes and upheld laws that denied the Jewish people their most basic rights and enabled the Nazis to perpetrate the worst crime in history. 2 weeks ago, on Holocaust Memorial Day, I pledged this: no amount of pressure and no decision in any international forum will prevent Israel from defending itself against those who seek our destruction. To all the enemies of Israel, including their collaborators in The Hague, I renew that pledge today. Israel will wage our war against Hamas until that war is won, because never again is now.
I can also confirm today that I have reasonable grounds to believe, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of the State of Palestine from at least the 8th of October 2023. The crimes include starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, willfully causing great suffering, serious injury to body or health or cruel treatment, willful killing or murder, and intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population, as well as crimes against humanity of extermination and or murder, persecution, and allegations of crimes of committing other inhumane acts. My office submits that these individuals, through a common plan, have systematically deprived the civilian population of Gaza of objects indispensable to human survival. We have reached that conclusion based upon interviews with survivors, many eyewitnesses, experts, from satellite imagery, statements from Israeli officials, including the 2 individuals subject to the present application, as well as based upon several hundred authenticated videos, photographs, and audio recordings, many of which were taken and shared by victims and eyewitnesses themselves. My office charges Netanyahu and Gallant as co-perpetrators and as superiors in the commission of these alleged crimes. Israel, like all states, has the right to defend its population. It has every right to ensure the return of hostages that have been criminally and callously taken. Those rights, however, do not absolve Israel of its obligations to comply with international humanitarian law. Intentionally causing death, starvation, injury, and suffering to the civilian population, including so very many women and children, are criminal means to achieve military and political goals. That's what we allege. I have reasonable grounds to believe that 3 senior leaders of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, Mohammed Daif, and Ismail Haniyeh, bear criminal responsibility for the following international crimes committed on the territory of Israel and the State of Palestine from at least the 7th of October 2023. Extermination as a crime against humanity. Murder as a crime against humanity and as a war crime.